Hey everyone, in this video I'm going to be referencing a post presented by the people at Understanding Canada. It's a Facebook page that I stumbled across in my news feed. I'm not familiar yet with where they rest or reside on the political spectrum, but just based on this short interaction that I'll be referencing, it seems that they are very much all about promoting government or collectivism or even socialism to some aspect, to some degree, but being wholly against businesses or corporations. And when I see that, and that's the thing I've noticed and understood now for many years, is actually the term corporation is an act of legislation. Without government, they're just businesses, right? They're just store owners or shop owners, business owners, entrepreneurs. It was the state, it is government that created and mandated legislation that turned businesses into corporations, into legal persons, right? So already the mere concept of the corporation is fully a central planning initiative. But once again, let's just go back to even if you're not a corporation, because as we understand, if you're Canadian or American, well, in Canada, you can set up your business as a sole proprietorship, limited liability corporation. I mean, there's many different ways you can set up your business. But because each business is owned by an individual and they have their own goals, intentions, or implementation in how to grow their business, there is no one size fits all. And you can't point to any particular business owner and say, that person, because they own a business, they must be immoral, they must be corrupt, they must be unjust, they must be a bunch of greedy thieves and authoritarians. Well, you can't use even the authoritarian pretense, because in a business, that relationship is completely voluntary, right? So if you are an employee in a business or you're a consumer that goes to shop in a particular business, that interaction, that whole exchange happens voluntarily. They can't force you to buy their products and they can't force you to work for them. But when you're talking about central planning governments, well, that's a whole different ballgame, right? We have no capacity as citizens in any particular geographical landmass. I'm a Canadian. I have no capacity to say, listen, I don't want to deal with the federal government, the federal Liberals, or the provincial government. That's a relationship that is imposed on me against my will, right? And if any money goes towards the government, it's not like I've offered it voluntarily. They take that. They force the employer, as part of being a business owner, to be their hired hands, right? The intermediary that takes a portion of a person's income and gives it to the government. The business doesn't benefit anyway for that, right? Like in that particular process of taxation. And if they do, if there is any area subsequently where they benefit to it, once again, it goes back to, well, how did they benefit? Well, through government. So that's kind of circular logic makes sense when you're talking about government, because it's all about force, authoritarianism, control, mandates, right? Imposing their social or economic wills onto the masses. No business owner can do that. You know that. There's no business owner, whether it's Walmart, a huge, giant corporation worth billions and billions of dollars, right? They can't force you to shop there, and they can't just go around taking portions of your income or controlling how you live socially or any of those, all those things. There's no mandates when it comes to businesses. It's a voluntary relationship. Government, as I've said, 100% involuntary, 100% forced. And the thing is, too, with that is there's no way to hold people in government to account, because they're the rulers. They're the ones that get to set the rules. Whereas, in a business or a corporation, they can set the rules. But once again, it's a voluntary relationship. So you can set as authoritarian type of rules you want, or as more free market type of rules you want. But ultimately, it's going to be not imposed on the people, but presented. And the people have the choice to voluntarily opt in or not, or to opt out. So that, I know I'm already going off already here on a bit of a tangent, but I just wanted to point that out first and foremost, because I'm going to read my comment, my subsequent comment on this article, and then I'm going to read the follow-up comment from the administrator of the page, and then we'll delve into and actually touch down on any other nuanced aspects or positions put forth by whether it's me or the administrator of the page. So anyways, this is in regards to a CBC article. I actually shared it on my own Facebook page as well. Minimum wage hikes could cost 60,000 jobs and maybe more, Bank of Canada report calculates. So the Bank of Canada, right? Oh, like as if they're not one of the biggest culprits and reasons for all this disastrous economic situation that most people find themselves in. So I'm just going to read my comment here. It is the constant government interventions into the economy that cause the need for these wage floors to begin with, as in having a central bank and government that prints money to prop up or bail out their crony corporate counterparts, which in turn devalues the currency, which in turn causes a loss of purchasing power, which affects the bottom line of businesses in many ways, and that is only scratching the surface. Politicians and their media mouthpieces like to portray the evil business owners as greedy devils who are just too mean to pay their employees a decent wage. But of course, they won't come out and admit that higher wages means more government tax revenue, which benefits them directly. So you know, if you're an adult and if you're watching this video and you're at least, I would say at least 30, 40 years old, some of the younger people might not have had enough time in the workforce or seeing the difference and the increases in prices in reflection in correlation to their wages for the products and services that we consume. Those people might not quite understand things as of yet. So if you're a little older, like in your 30s, 40s, especially, well, 50s or 60s, you all at least know, even if you're not financially or economically astute, you at least know that over the years, you know, wages have gone up, you know, triple, 4 times, sometimes 5 times, right? I just, for me personally, I remember in the early 80s, I was making about $4 an hour. And people say, oh, how could you live off that? Oh, $4. But what they don't realize is the prices of all the products and services that I consumed, or the staples that I rely on and require to sustain my livelihood, such as housing, you know, food and fuel, like energy, all of those things were much, much, much cheaper. And actually, the purchasing power, when I was making $4 an hour, my purchasing power was actually greater than if I was making, in today's money, roughly around 15, 16, 17 bucks an hour. $4 an hour then, in early 1980s, I had better purchasing power at $4 an hour then than I do at like $16, $17 an hour in 2017, 2018. So all these mandated minimum wage increases, you might see some small benefit, but in reality, when that finally all starts to trickle out into the economy and the prices are increased as a reflection of supposedly your increased purchasing power, you see that your purchasing power goes where you think it was going to go up, it goes right back, and the line stays basically steady because the prices go up to reflect your wage increases. The only time you're actually going to benefit properly is if your wage increases supersede the increases of all the prices of the products and commodities and services that you consume. That's the only time you gain more purchasing power. But even when you're talking about price inflation, we also got to bring into the equation monetary inflation, which is another underlying contributing factor that greatly contributes to the reduction in your purchasing power. So anytime a currency is devalued, well, I mean, if you print it, it's just old economics 101, supply and demand. If you just print a buttload supply of money without actual needed demand for it, well, it's going to devalue the worth of that money, right? Just common sense. You don't have to be a monetarist like Milton Friedman. You don't have to be, actually, you don't even have to really understand macroeconomics very much to understand the simplistic nature of supply and demand. But as we've seen since 2008, central banks and central governments, and Canada's not, they didn't get to escape that, even though they tried to present and put forth the narrative that they did. But central banks, the Bank of Canada, in addition to the IMF and the Federal Reserve, they printed in excess of $114 billion just to recapitalize the failing banks, the big banks in Canada. Now, maybe the folks at Understand in Canada here, maybe they're not familiar with the fact that the Central Bank of Canada actually borrowed and printed a huge amount of money to prop up banks that ultimately, without that bailout, probably would have failed or succumbed and would have caused a lot more economic and financial pain for millions and millions and millions of Canadians. But it was their fault. Now, the government can come in and later and say, oh, but we bailed them out, which saved everybody. But in reality, all you did was paint over the malinvestments and the detriments of having this central planning economic model that we currently live under. You know, they keep making mistakes, but because they have the power of the purse, right, and the ability to just turn on the printing press, well, they try to paint over the mistakes. But as you understand, you can't just paint over your mistake. It's going to rear its head eventually. They just want it to rear its head much further off into the future because most of these people are Keynesians. Right? And in the end, we're all dead is kind of their mentality. Anyways, I'm going to get into the second part of my comment here. This same kind of thing has been happening for a long time. The minimum wages in 1985 was around $4 an hour, but all the prices of our staples were much, much lower than they are today. So without some actual market fundamentals to correct the effects of all the economic manipulation, the same will continue to happen. It will be a further continuation of this dog chasing his own tail scenario that never amounts to any true gains or progress. Real wages would go up without ever needing the government to mandate it if we can get to the point when governments and corporations no longer have the capacity to work together in order to keep labor supply overly abundant and suppressing wages. Bringing in 1 million more immigrants over the next 3 years, allowing mass influx of illegal asylum seekers, and continuing the temporary foreign workers program guarantees that Canadians won't see any real increases in their prosperity for the foreseeable future. So like I say, and like I've said many times in the past, what is that one underlying factor that is always and forever omnipresent in any one of these, no matter what side of the political spectrum or no matter what type of ideology you follow, what is the one common theme that is always underlying and omnipresent when you're talking about corporations or globalism or nationalism or, all this stuff? Government. There's never any point in time where anyone can point out and say, oh, that this corporation does this and they do it against the mandates and edicts of the central planners in government. You know that never happens. You can't. As much as Walmart might have access to billions of dollars of capital, they don't have a standing army, a police force, or a gigantic regulatory state that will use the heavy-handed tactics against their opponents. It's only governments that have that capacity. Anyway, this is the response that I got back from the administrator of Understand Canada. Okay, there's some economic fundamentals you're not seeing here. First of all, government interventions attempt to stabilize the economy for the predatory monopolistic actions of our largest corporations. So, before I even continue any further, so government interventions attempt to stabilize the economy from the predatory monopolistic actions of the largest corporation. So, predatory, like I said, have you ever been forced? Has Rogers or Bell or Walmart or Sobeys or any of these places, any of these corporations, Best Buy, has anyone ever come to your door or sent you something in the mail, a bill for buying or purchasing products or services that they offer and said, oh, you got to pay for them whether you want them or not? No. Your relationship with any corporation is wholly voluntary. The only corporations that can mandate or force you to use their services are the ones that have used government legislation to impose that mandate upon the populace, right? So like insurance companies, government mandates that you have insurance, so insurance companies benefit tremendously at the fact that you will have to use their services. Now, there is at least some competition, but it's still mandates and a very small pool of them. So they all know that it's just a matter of divvying up market share amongst each other. But they're still guaranteed that you're going to have to be forced to use their services whether you like it or not. So you can get into the whole price fixing thing. Whereas in the private sector, in anything that's completely and 100% voluntary, under those scenarios in the private sector, usually services and product reliability and quality goes up while prices go down. Anything mandated by central planners and government, well, it has the opposite effect. Services go down, right? Quality goes down, prices go up. And you see this time and time and time and time again. So he's already, and monopolistic. Come on, monopolistic government actually meets the very definition of being monopolistic. Corporations, no. And if they do gain any pretense of being a monopoly, well, it's because the people are choosing to make it a monopoly voluntarily, because corporations can impose their products or services on the people. Only governments can do that. So if it becomes a natural monopoly just because sheer fact, like say Google or some of these places, just by sheer fact is, hey, they do it a lot better than everyone else, so that's my go-to source. That's a natural monopoly. Government is a fully forced monopoly. So this person, like I said, they already got, just in the first sentence or so, they've already got so many things ass backwards. Were it not for government intervention, we'd only have one big bank by now, as they would have all merged. We'd all be paying through the nose for health care, as would be privatized. Like total fucking, where are they getting any of these pretenses that if it wasn't for government, we'd only have one bank? There would be no way, if there's no government, there would be no way to prevent other people from starting their own bank. So if there was this evil monopolistic bank that was just, running rickshaw all over the populace, if there was no one to prevent someone else to start up a bank or no barriers to entry, you don't think that nobody would want to step in and offer a better product or service at a cheaper price so that they could reap the rewards and dividends for doing so? I mean, come on. Come on. Like already this is telling me, like, you're talking from an ideological position. You're not thinking critically in any way, shape, or form when you're putting forth this kind of rhetoric, right? Jeez. Okay, let's go on here. And we'd all be paying through the nose for healthcare, as it would be privatized. Listen, we're already paying through the nose for socialized healthcare, and as we're seeing time and time again, how many articles have we seen time and time again where people are left out in the hallways for days, and the hospitals are all overburdened with too many patients and not enough staff, right? And underfunded. So, I mean, come on. Privatization would allow competition. Name one place in your real life. This is the thing. I'd love to, and hopefully I'll get to speak to this person someday. Name anywhere where there's actual competition where that has happened. Name one area where there's actual, real, genuine competition where services get, worse and more expensive and become more monopolistic as a result of having competition. I just don't know how you try to square that round peg. Anyways, let's move on. And likely we'd all be with the same phone company. Government already squeezes out competition in Canada, which is why we're all forced to use, was it Bell, Rogers, or Telus, basically. And there's a couple new entrants coming in. They're trying desperately to get a small piece of the market share. But I mean, come on. Bell and Rogers have used government lobbying to create their monopolistic situation in Canada where there is no competition. But once again, this person is completely neglecting that reality. But most important, the vast majority of government intervention into the economy are for the benefit of the private sector. Maybe some crony corporations, but really, yeah, the government's taking more and more of your productive income and overburden you with massive amounts of regulation and bureaucracy. Yep, they got your best interest at heart. Trust me when they're doing this stuff. To ensure markets stay stable for investors, to ensure profits keep rolling for shareholders, and to keep viable SMEs from being devoured whole by multinationals. Have you ever talked to a business owner, like someone that actually has owned a business, and asked them are you appreciative of it? Because if you have, I'll tell you, the glaring divide that you will see would be the crony corporate fox. Yes, there are some. Yeah, we get that. They would agree with you there. But the overwhelming majority of the small to medium business, which makes up and comprises the bulk of businesses in Canada, the U.S., and all of Western developed countries, they are very much against the government mandates and edicts. So you might want to have a few conversations to clarify that. As for government money printing, you've drank the gold bug libertarian Kool-Aid on that. Our central bank only creates about 3% of our money supply, much of which never even leaves the central bank. The rest is created by private banks as debt with interest. Take M0 divided by M3. So they're trying to talk about all this. And they are, you know what, this person is actually very much correct about this. The central bank is not the one that prints all the money, but they are very much the ones that has bailed out GM, Chrysler, and all of these big banks that this person's talking about that is printing all this false money through the fractional reserve bank. And actually, this is one of the few times that I will agree with this person. Yeah, I'm with you as far as that goes. Yeah, I'm not a fan of any of these big bank institutions that have the guaranteed underlying seal of approval from the government that says, no matter what you fuckers do, we'll bail you out and we'll use taxpayer money and the unborn and future liabilities and generations to paint over to mask all of your evil or corrupt lending practices. I'm with you, and I'm on board with you there, man, totally. Or a woman, whoever's the administrator here is, yeah, not defending the big banks at all. But guess what? The banks don't have any pretense of authority to bail themselves out. So in Canada, you know, when all the banks here in Canada, after the financial crash, after the 2008 economic collapse, the Great Recession, as they call it, that would have really become a Great Depression. Guess who bailed all those banks out to the tune of $114 billion? That's right. It was the Bank of Canada, in conjunction with the government. So these banks, they were, yes, they were already proven to be evil, just as you would suggest, and did some really unscrupulous practices. And they should have had to suffer the consequence of all that bad acting. But who changed that? Who prevented them from being held to account for their bad investments, for their bad intentions, for their bad loans, for all the ills that they have caused in society? It was your government. It was the people that you're defending and the central bank that has now tried to force and impose $114 billion worth of bailout onto future and successive generations. Because as we all know, at the current debt levels, it's not like you're going to be paying for it. You know, if you're an older person that has actually benefited from all this debt, you're not even going to be the one paying for it. You're hoping that your kids or grandkids are going to be paying for it, right? So once again, I don't understand where this person is trying to come from, other than, like I say, it's weird. They're defending government. Hey, I'm all with you. I'm on your side if you want to go against these crony corporations and some of these big banks and these institutions. But as we all know, their power rests and resides on government shielding them from being held to account for their bad acts and bad deeds. I'm a free market kind of guy. I'm a libertarian, as you obviously are recognizing. So what would a libertarian say under those situations? Without even talking to me, what do you think? Would a libertarian agree to the banks being bailed out? Nope. There'd be a whole lot of people today suffering a whole lot of hardships, but the people like myself that were wise and astute and economically responsible, we'd be benefiting tremendously as a result. But market manipulators, central planners, governments, and crony corporations, and the central bank like to keep things turned upside down and on its head. So that they're the ones that are always benefit at the expense of the people, at the expense of the taxpayer. Any issue you have with the effects of the money supply on inflation or devaluation, you can put 90% of the blame on private banks. Yeah, oh please, lots of blame on private banks. But they wouldn't be able to do that stuff if it wasn't for their ability to lobby government or be bailed out by governments, like I said. Anyways, but seeing as monetarism has been thoroughly debunked and disproven anyways, you can throw that whole line of thinking out the window. Even the Fed admits that the connection between money supply and inflation is tenuous at best. Empirical studies have proven there is no connection. The reason why we're not seeing as much in inflation as we normally would is because the money's not being spent in our domestic population, in our domestic countries. If those trillions of dollars that the banksters and the government fucks were printing to prop up this false economy. If it's actually going into the real economy, well, you would see the reality would be there. But because this stuff's all being stashed in offshore accounts, was there, I think, an estimation between 20 and 30 trillion dollars that's all being hidden, not being used, not being utilized, right? So that's the lack of the inflation. But we're still seeing the inflation because while they're hiding it in different places, we're seeing that inflation is coming from different areas. So housing. Hello, housing. You tell me there's no inflation there? Hello, gas prices in correlation to the oil, the price of oil per barrel. No inflation there? Have you been out and bought food in the last few years? Groceries, meats, some of the staples that we rely on? How about electricity prices? No inflation there? Listen, we all know, well, apparently maybe you folks don't know, but the CPI, the way they measure inflation, they've taken out all the major factors that would contribute where you would see some real inflation. But they want to keep you believing, and you're obviously believing their bullshit, that, oh, there's no inflation. No. Like I say, if you take all the actual factors where inflation actually resides, if you take those out of the equation, well, you can say that, hey, there's no inflation. Really? Well, what about that? Hey, what's that back there? Oh, don't look there. Come on. Oh, and listen to this one. Tax revenues do not benefit politicians. Swear to God, that's an actual sentence that this person presented. Tax revenues do not benefit politicians. Their pay is not linked to performance. Well, that's true, right? That's true. They will get paid no matter how much or how little taxes they pull in. Well, actually, no, that's not true. Because if they couldn't pull in, the taxes from the people, if they couldn't force people to pay for their incomes, well, then it would greatly affect their incomes. Don't you think? Right? You don't think so? I sure as hell do. This also begs the question if you understand that when banks buy government bonds, it is money creation. Yeah, once again, okay, yeah. They don't have to put anything up. They can buy bonds lending the government money created out of thin air and gets interest from it. Yes. Listen, like I said already, I'm on board with you. Not a fan of the fractional reserve banking and this whole central planning system of governance and no competing currencies. See, in the history, that when currency was based on actual tangible commodities that couldn't be manipulated. Well, I mean, the Romans tried it back in the day, right? When they were trying to get rid of how much gold was actually in their gold and replacing it with things like tungsten. But, it's much more difficult to manipulate real measures of value such as gold and silver. Whereas paper currencies and fiat currencies, and with their fractional reserve, so they only have to withhold a certain percentage of it and then lend out to the tune of 10 or maybe 20 times, right? Yes, I'm not a fan of all that stuff either. I'm all about free markets and like a gold type standard. So yeah, a bank should have to be capitalized to whatever they're borrowing or lending out, so that if everyone decides they want to cash in, well, there's enough money to pay everyone off. So yeah, I'm with you there. But once again, it's still not carrying anything that I presented in my original comment. So without some actual market fundamentals to correct the effects of all this economic manipulation, the same will continue to happen. Oh, they're quoting from my original comment. Market fundamentals? What fundamentals are applied by whom? You decry economic intervention and then say the solution is to intervene in some way to apply some market fundamentals. Well, no. If you understood what those two words meant together, market, which is just people, right? It's not imposing nothing. It's just allowing market fundamentals, so people to act on their own best interests and with natural and proper incentives. There's no manipulation. I'm not just market fundamentals, because people would not be willingly, people wouldn't go along with all this. I'll just bail out the banks or GM or Ford or Bombardier. Market fundamental means people wouldn't be forced to opt into these crony systems or these bailouts, which would greatly affect the economy going forward. Real wages would go up without ever needing the government to mandate it if we could get to the point when governments and corporations no longer have the capacity to work together in order to keep labor supply overly abundant and suppressing wages. Another quote from my comment. It's called Nairu, and it's something both the government and corporations want. You don't seem to get that the government works for the largest players in the private sector. it enables them to do what they do without interference from laborers. Then, okay, you want to blame the corporations, whatever, okay? I'm blaming the government, so let's just remove that relationship completely, right? Would we be agreeing with there? Because I don't really care if you want to blame the corporations as far as that stuff goes and me blame the government. If we sever that relationship, that means one won't be able to use the other and vice versa, right? So would you at least be willing to agree that let's sever this relationship between businesses and government where they can use each other to destroy people in positions of labor or employees, their ability to hold not just their employers to account, but to demand higher wages and be able to withdraw their support without the corporation having the ability to use governments to bring in workers from foreign countries. Because these corporations couldn't do this without governments allowing it to happen. So once again, it's because of governments. Corporations might like doing this, but it can only happen under the pretense of central planning governments. They could never create this. I mean, it would cost way too much. Think about what it would cost for a business to spend all the capital and do all that would be needed and necessary to go to these foreign countries and bring these foreign workers and have them trained and all that it would entail when you have a domestic population that already has that in spades, right? Think about that. They wouldn't be able to do it. They wouldn't be able to benefit as much as they do now without having the government to force the taxpayers or subsidize to a tremendous amount a substantial portion of the costs involved with doing all of this. Without government mandated minimum wages, we'd have the wage slaves we see in other developed nations. Yeah, sure you would. There's lots of people that work for companies that don't have mandated minimum wages that make far in excess, and it's completely voluntary. So that alone will destroys your argument. That destroys your argument just by sheer fact that we don't all work for minimum wage. So I don't know how you're even trying to present that, right? I don't even know how you don't understand that when the government mandates higher wages, they benefit tremendously from the extra added revenue and taxes as a result. I don't know how you don't seem to know how to put that two and two together. Companies move to developing countries precisely because they don't have governments protecting laborers. No, the governments are actually suppressing the people, right? So it's not that the government are protecting the people. What, China? Do you think these companies just get to walk into these countries and set up shop? Or do you think they kind of have to ask permission or have some kind of agreement with the government first and foremost? So the government actually allows this all to happen. So once again, government, the authoritarians, the ones that are easily proven that are actually the ones that operate on the very premise of forced subjugation. But yeah, they're protecting you. Your master's protecting you. I mean, really though? Wow. This person is very much dogmatic, a big believer in the state, right? As some overarching benevolent institute. There's a good reason our largest corporations are compared to psychopaths in their behavior, but politicians aren't. It's because they are run by psychopaths, and they will devour everything in their path unless there are limits and controls placed on them. Economic intervention, especially by an entity representing the public interest. What does that even mean? The public interest. As if we're all just a collective of bored robots or shit, right? A collective, our minds are all just one, and we all think and want the exact same things at the same time, right? And have same preferences. And like I say, when you talk in this collective mentality, well, this person doesn't obviously understand government, even what the very underlying premise or what government entails, what it is to be a politician. They don't even see, they're trying to put forth a present that these people are what? Somehow benevolent protectors of the people. Meanwhile, they are literally the ones that want to seek out to impose their economic or social wills or edicts onto the population. And not just business owners, but the private citizen as well. Will always be necessary. Else we end up living in more of a corporate oligarchy than we already do. Well, how could we live in a corporate oligarchy? If these governments are protecting you, well, I guess they're not doing a very good job, huh? Like I say, holy... I don't know how, like I say, I don't know how they can try to square that round peg. This is the problem with these people. Like I say, they're ideologues. just like some religious zealots on the right. They talk just pure nonsense, and you can tell it's just stuff that was jammed in their head, and they're just repeating and regurgitating, obviously without actually running it through the old cranium very much at all, right? Short-termism, speculation, leveraged buyouts, these are all the thinking of those with nothing but profits on their mind, and they create massive amounts of instability which they can take advantage of. Government intervention seeks to mitigate their behavior, but even without a government, there are still interventions like the circuit breakers on stock markets that freeze trading when things swing too wildly. Do you think that intervention should be done away with? First of all, when you talk about the stock market, once again, it's an opt-in on an opt-out situation. I don't have to delve into the stock market at all. I'm not forced to comply or participate in it. Well, unless it's mandated by someone in government, right? So what happens in the stock market, like I say, as long as everyone understands the rules, hey, if people want to gamble, if people want to take risks, if people want to do all kinds of crazy shit, I say let them. But they should also suffer the consequences that comes as a result. Understand, we decry the government when they deserve to be criticized, but you seem to not be criticizing the Canadian government, but rather the entire concept of a central government. Yeah, I sure am. You better believe it. I'm universally consistent in my morals and ethics. Yeah, I don't pretend that someone has any pretense of authority over entire geographical landmass. Just like in the old days with kings, just like with dictators, just like monarchs of the past, or pharaohs. Yep, I don't believe in mysticism. I don't believe in authoritarian mysticism. I'm not a slave, I'm not a subject, I'm not a serf. Let's get that straight right now. So you're absolutely correct in that, but once again, I can prove, and if we have a debate and a discussion as a follow-up to this video release, then I'll explain to you how easily and how simple it is to point out that government, the very pretense of having central planning government, is wholly illegitimate. You can't get from here to there logically in any way, shape, or form. I can't delegate a right or authority that I don't have myself, that I don't possess. I can't delegate an authority that I don't personally possess onto someone else just because they call themselves a politician. So if I don't have any legal right or authority to plunder my neighbor just because I go vote for a politician to do it, how did I circumvent that morality? By using the mysticism of government, by using the mysticism of having a central planner act on my behalf. And whether it was me or a group of people like me, so whether a minority or a majority, doesn't matter how many people choose or clamor for a central planner to impose their wills or edicts onto others, it doesn't legitimize it in any way, shape, or form. The only reason why you and other people believe that government is legitimate is because you were taught in government schools. It's in their best interest to keep you confused and confounded and ignorant to reality and ignorant to facts and ignorant to universally consistent principles. While we need more local decision-making in neighborhoods and cities, a central government still has many uses, not the least of which is keeping half the continent free and easy to travel from ocean to ocean without borders or hassle. Otherwise, we end up with a bunch of fiefdoms and we're back in the Middle Ages, right? Yeah, because we could just travel freely unmolested, right? Like, dude, trying to buy a few cases of beer in Quebec and getting charged for that, right? But yeah, we have free movement, right? Yeah, sure, yeah. No. What it is you're like, in Canada, you're like a free-range slave. They'll let you move around a little bit, but only under the pretense of all the mandates, rules, and edicts that they impose on you. So you got a ball and chain on both legs, constantly burdening every activity that you do. Because like I say, tell me something that you can do that's not heavily regulated or dictated or controlled by some central planning authority. Very few activities that you can do that is not completely regulated and dictated, controlled by your central planners. But you're trying to pretend that we have this freedom thanks to government. Anyways, that's the last of this comment. This went on a whole lot longer than I was hoping, but it was something that I want to cover and make sure I dealt with the pertinent issues or points that this person was trying to put forward the present. Now, I'm going to make this video and I'll upload it shortly within the next few days, and I'll share it to this page as well. And hopefully the person, the administrator of Understand Canada, if they want, hey, I'm more than willing to have a Skype conversation and have a discussion or debate regarding any of these pretenses that you try to put forward the present. Because my whole thing in life is not just to be combative for the sake of being combative, but I want to help educate and inform people properly. So and I'm going to do everything that I say and suggest. I guarantee what I do is I run that through that universally consistent loop, right? If there's anything when it's doing that loop, if there's anywhere that is not universally morally consistent, then I have to reject that and start thinking of different areas and aspects of the conversation, of the topic, because I'm all about being universally consistent. I don't want any contradictions. I don't want mysticism to be the basis or the premise for anything that I talk about when you're talking about things as important as social and economic developments in any particular country, in any particular geographical landmass. It's a Canadian Libertarian, and I love liberty.